Hey, welcome to the Gig Life Podcast. I'm your host, Stevie Taylor. This is another edition of the Spotlight Series. Now, the Spotlight Series is where myself and my friends, we sit down and we talk about our favourite musicians, be it local, be it worldwide, musicians that have influenced us, inspired us, impacted us as musicians ourselves. We talk about their careers, their legacy, their music. We listen to some of the songs that they've played on and we analyse those songs the best way that we know how. This is certainly not a new concept. We're not changing the game here. We're just hanging out, bouncing stories off each other, sharing information that the others may not have known, but in the process adding to the legacy of these brilliant musicians. So today's episode is all about legendary American drummer Steve Gadd. Stephen Kendall Gadd, born April 9th, 1945, is an American drummer, percussionist and session musician. Gadd is one of the most well-known and highly regarded studio drummers in the industry, recognised by his induction into the Modern Drummer Hall of Fame in 1984. Steve's performances on Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover and Late in the Evening, Steely Dan's Asia, Chick Corea's Night Sprite and Jarreau's Spain are legendary and some examples of his style. One of the most influential drummers of all time, Steve Gadd set a standard in contemporary drumming techniques and performance, and in doing so, launched 1,000 imitators. Joining me today to talk about Steve Gadd are four outstanding drummers and friends of mine: Lance Phillip, Hamish Stuart, Gordon Rytmeister, and Darryn Farrugia. These guys have also previously been guests on the Gig Life podcast, so if you haven't already, go and check those episodes out. Links are in the show notes. We've all chosen a bunch of songs that Gadd has played on, and not necessarily the songs that you would expect either. We'll listen to parts of those songs and we'll give you our take on them. We'll talk about his influence, his sound, his legacy, and hopefully do our bit to add to that legacy. So ladies and gentlemen, it's time to turn the Gig Life podcast spotlight onto Dr. Steve Gadd. You just listen to me. Hop on the bus, Gus. You don't need to discuss much. Just drop off the key, leave, and get yourself free. I think we're drum rolling. See what I did there?
Hey,
see what I did there?
Look out.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Gig Life Podcast Spotlight Steve Gadd episode. Today we are going to talk about the legendary American drummer Steve Gadd. I would like to introduce the panel. With me in a room in Sydney, Australia, Hamish Stuart.
Hey there, Stevie and folks.
Gordy Rytmeister. How are you,
mate?
How are you, boys?
Good. Thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
In Wellington, New Zealand, Lance Phillip.
Hey, good to see you.
And in lockdown in Melbourne, Darryn Farrugia. How are you, man?
Good, mate. Thanks for having me.
No worries. I'm honoured to be talking to you guys again. I've had each and every one of you. We've done individual episodes on the Gig Life podcast, so listeners go back and listen to all those. They're really good. If I didn't like these blokes, we wouldn't be doing it again today. And I've also these four guys, of all the people that I know, are the biggest Gadd fans or freaks that I know. So, and it's great to have you all here, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now, what I thought we might start off with, we'll go around the rooms, and I want you to talk about the first time if you can remember this, first time you ever heard of Steve Gadd or heard Steve Gadd. And I don't know if you remember what that feeling was, or so I might start with you, Hamish. If that's all right.
Okay. I hope I've got this right. because it's quite a long time ago. Maybe Gordy can cover me on this. Just he looks after my memory. I'm pretty sure it was Herbie Mann.
Wow.
At the town hall.
Oh yeah.
In the 70s.
That's early.
I'm hoping this is right, and I'm hoping it was Steve.
Yeah, that's
and I think we'd heard some stuff with him on it. So we sort of knew who he was, but, no one kind of had really got... I hadn't seen him live until that night, and I seem to remember him playing on a set of Rogers drums with his sound, like with the hydraulic heads and all the toms tuned really dead and playing groove-based music with... Herbie Mann, I was a kid and I can't remember who else was in the band, but I do remember that feeling and the sound. And I think Doug Gallagher did the support, and he told me a little bit, about how the drums were covered with tape, and, it was kind of odd. And, that was my first sort of actual introduction to that feeling. And it's sort of been the same ever since. Like his feel, whatever he's playing, and just going through the tunes that we've all submitted for this podcast, it's the same thing. It's like he's just evolved. I mean, I won't go on now, but that was my introduction to him, I think.
What kind of what kind of music was that?
Well, it was sort of groove based. It was at that stage, Herbie Mann, he was a flautist, and he kind of played this. He made an album called Push Push with Al Jackson played drums on it.
Mm.
And it was, it's a beautiful record. Like the rhythm section is just smoking, but really simple and just backbeat and grooving like mad. And I don't know whether Steve had worked with Herbie Mann. I think he did, because I think I had a look a while ago on other records, but he was on this tour, and it was really straight ahead, like eighth note groove based soul music. Yeah.
Gordy.
Well, I was just that's so cool, because I know that all sounds exactly like the story Gary Hyde told about Herbie Mann in Melbourne, playing at the Melbourne Town Hall, and Ronnie Sandlands was in the support there. You know this, Darryn?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And apparently Ronnie called Gary up and said, you got to check out this drummer. And Gary got there and saw that the drums were all taped up, and he thought it was ridiculous. And then he went out the front, and it sounded like a recording studio. They'd never heard anything like it. It was incredible.
Yeah.
But for me, I grew up, as I've said, watching Countdown and like sort of an Oz rock thug, and I was into Led Zeppelin and all of that. But I did read Modern Drummer, and so I knew this name, Steve Gadd, kept popping up. Everybody would talk about Steve Gadd. It's early 80s. Everybody would talk about Steve Gadd, but I didn't know, boy from the suburbs, I didn't know where to look to even start, But a school teacher of mine happened to be an audiophile. He was a sound guy, but he was also like an audiophile, and he had video laser discs, the 12-inch laser discs that came out. They're sort of a Japanese thing. They didn't really take off until video. This is pre-DVDs, and we had this sort of party night at school, or something happened at school, and he brought in these two. Well, he brought in a bunch of these laser discs, and two of them. One was the Simon and Garfunkel concert in Central Park, and another was the Grover Washington concert. And, everyone else was out sort of partying in the quadrangle. I was just fixed to the TV watching this guy play the drums and not knowing who it was. And I remember, he did the Simon, the concert in Central Park. To this day, I get chills when I watch that. It really moves me, and there's something about the way those guys played together at that time. and it's Richard T and Anthony Jackson and Eric Gale on the guitar. Ralph McDonald's on percussion on the Grover Washington one, and Grady Tate's playing sort of double drums percussion on the Garfunkel, Simon & Garfunkel. But it's so deep, and the way the sounds blend, and it's basically, it's kind of the Stuff Band, or Richard, or at least Richard and Steve, and it's so heavy. Like it's it still gets me, but and Gadd's doing the 16th thing on the ride cymbal and the hi-hats and coming down, and I just remember seeing that, and it was like nothing I'd heard or seen before, and just intrigued me. I didn't really understand it, but it just caught my interest, and I realise now, looking back, that it's probably as much to do with how deep it felt. Like it just was, this depth in the pocket, just grabbed me. But that for me, it's so I've never looked back.
Yeah. My Steve Gadd story, as Lance knows, I grew up in a small town in New Zealand called Masterton, and we had and it's in a district called the Wairarapa. We had the Wairarapa Country Music Club, which was a club that met once a month at a local hall, and that was my first sort of foray into music. And I'd started playing drums, and the president of that club, he had a drum set in the back of his van, and he said, "Look, if you come to our like once a month, you come sit on the drums. You can take those drums home, right?" So anyway, they used to call me Steve Gadd because my first name's Steve, and they go, "Hey, Steve Gadd," and I had no idea who this guy was. And then it wasn't just this guy Tom calling me that. It was Tom and a couple of the other guys in the band and a couple of the older people that were the regulars. And because it used to be like we were the house band, and these people would come up and sing, and they'd come up to me and say, "Hey, Steve Gadd, here's the time," So I always kind of knew who this guy was. And of course, like you said, Gordy, the Modern Drummer magazines, these ads would pop up with this guy, Steve Gadd. Yeah. And I'm going, I look nothing like Steve Gadd. What are they talking about, And the first time I actually heard Steve Gadd was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. And I had another mate in my hometown, and he was a real, he was just a great mate. And he introduced me to Gino Vanelli, Vinnie Colaiuta, that Nightwalker album. Yep. And then, he also introduced me to the actual music of Steve Gadd, and it was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. And Gordy and Hamish, I don't know if you can see that picture up there. And I'll take a photo of this later, guys, and I'll show you. But that's me sitting up there, sitting on a black drum set, trying to mimic Gadd. I got the Gadd sticks, got the hydraulic heads, got the black curly hair because I'd seen all the pictures. So that's my Steve Gadd introduction. So Lance.
Yeah. Hey, but isn't it funny how Steve, you wound up having lessons with Norman Gadd, in Wellington.
Yep.
It's like it's not a really popular surname, and there's this guy Norman Gadd who's in the symphony orchestra that was a classical percussionist, and I think he one time introduced himself to Steve Gadd, but I don't know if there was anything further than that. They had like nothing in common with each other, especially the groove. But anyway. So Steve Gadd. Look, the whole way that I first heard Steve Gadd was because my parents used to get these albums, from the World Record Club. It was sort of like, back in the 70s, it was this kind of record club thing with a catalogue, and they'd order a bunch of records and stuff. And for some reason, I think because my mother's a violinist, but likes a bit of jazz. And so she heard some Bob James recordings on the radio or something, and because it has strings in there, she thought, "Oh, this is really nice. I'll get a couple of these Bob James albums," And so I'm sort of like looking through the album sleeve, and, you know, it's got all the different musicians listed there. And I don't know if you've ever heard those first couple of Bob James albums. You know, the first one is pretty popular with all the rap artists now, with Nautilus, and then I think Bob James 2 album has got Take Me to the Mardi Gras, which has got that Andrew Smith drum beat at the front of that, you know, that everyone loops and things like that. But anyway, so those first 2 albums are where I first heard Steve Gadd, and they were on. They were like Bob James's versions of orchestral classics that was sort of like this bizarre mix of like screaming Maynard Ferguson horn section kind of thing with an amazing New York rhythm section. So with tunes like there's one called The Golden Apple. Have you ever heard of that one before? Or then there was another one called Solario, which was sort of a play on the rhythm from the bolero. So I first heard sort of Steve's snare drum playing mixed in with sort of a funky groove, and I'd never heard anything like that before. But then all these other Bob James albums sort of showed up, and that's where I sort of heard a bit more of Steve's playing on that. And then it wasn't really until the 80s when I've got like I think, is it the 1983 Modern Drummer magazine with him on the cover of it? And that's where I first thought, oh, wow, I've seen this guy's name in all these albums, and I've heard him on things. So that's kind of I probably heard Steve Gadd on all kinds of different recordings, but didn't know that it was him. And, you know, like where I'm from is kind of like only over the hill from where Stevie's from, in Upper Hutt, you know. So there's not much going on, or there wasn't much going on back then in the 70s with people, you know, knowing anything about music other than brass bands and orchestras. So, so that was my first introduction. Yeah.
A lot of great music came out of there, mate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Des?
Well, you know, when I was about 13, I got into George Benson, and so I was listening to albums like Weekend in LA, Breezin', In Flight, and those albums had Harvey Mason on it. And then for Christmas, my cousin bought me an album, which was a George Benson album called Living Inside Your Love, which had Harvey Mason on it. So I thought, and I'm listening to it, and then a track came on, and the drums sounded different, and everything about the drums sounded different. There were everything just sounded so clear and so clean. And being the inquisitive kid that I was, I thought, who is this? So I saw this name, Steve Gadd. It wasn't Harvey Mason. Harvey Mason was my guru up until this point. And then so I became aware of the Steve Gadd name at that point, and I also could hear that he sounded great. Then around the same time, there was, I think Chick Corea came out for a tour, early 80s, maybe 81. He had Tom Breckline playing drums. And anyway, I didn't go to that gig, but back in the day, the ABC used to have test patterns on the TV, and sometimes I would turn this on to hear what music was being played. And they were obviously doing some sort of commemorative Chick Corea thing. And I didn't know who the drummer was, but it completely blew my mind. Then I realized many years later, or even a few years later, that the tracks that I heard was Humpty Dumpty, and the Al Jarreau version of Spain. And so I bought myself that Al Jarreau album for my 15th birthday, and just really played Spain to death. And then hearing 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, again, before I knew it was Steve Gadd, I just loved the drums on that track. And then, again, there was that retrospective thing of going back and going, hey, that's right, I remember that track, and that is Steve Gadd. So, like you said, Lance, there's probably a lot of music that we heard growing up that had him playing on it that we weren't aware of at the time, and we're still playing catch up today. The funny thing is, I actually, because I like all of us, we've had this opportunity to meet him a number of times because he's travelled out here, and I still haven't said this to him, but I went through a phase where I was buying just about every record I could get my hands on with Steve Gadd in the credits, and I still, to this day, as a 53-year-old man, haven't listened to them yet. just so much.
I started to do that as well, but some of the albums that I found were like pretty obscure and probably not some of his best work, But
well, that happens. I mean, look, I remember buying a Robin Ford album that I thought was really rare, and I bought that record because I'm a fan of Robin Ford's playing. And I listened to this album and I thought, wow, this is not good music at all. And then, a little while after that, I met Tom Breckline, who was playing drums for him at the time, and I asked him about this record, and apparently it was a whole bunch of porno soundtracks that he had played on, that Robin Ford had played on, and the owner of those recordings had actually released those recordings at the height of Robin's popularity in order to make a bit of money, and there was some sort of criminal case going on. So I'm sure, there are a lot of those musicians out there who have played on a lot of records they're probably not so happy about. I can say that about my whole career.
You and me both, pal.
As Hamish mentioned before, in preparation to this tonight, we threw around a whole lot of songs, and we've all chosen 2 songs each. I don't know if we'll get through them all, but they'll definitely be in a playlist that everybody can listen to. I'll link that in the show notes. So we'll start going through the list and just listening to parts of these songs. We're not going to sit and listen to all of them. I might have them running, but sort of just fade them down the background while we can talk about it. So I thought, since Lance, you were talking about Bob James, I might start with your first pick, which is Pure Imagination by Bob James. Yeah. So can you tell us what album that's from, and a bit around what time that sort of came out, and if you can even remember first hearing that?
Yeah, so I think it's 1976, I think, when that was recorded. So anyway, I don't know, for some reason I was really attracted to listening to that particular album. I think I was probably 8 years old or something like that. And I didn't even know that song was from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But anyway, I kind of liked it. But I think the thing about this track that used to intrigue me was on this track is, he's playing 16th hi-hats, but the bell of the cymbal, is on the ands. And I was thinking, how on earth does he do that? Because I'd never seen him play at 8 years old. And I thought, wow, I wonder how he managed to play the bell of the cymbal and keep the hi-hats going, and then hitting the tom-tom and the snare and the bass drum all in between that, So I was really intrigued and attracted to like the feeling of it, the sound. Of course, the sound of the drums was, like his classic sound, I guess. That I don't know if it was really Creed Taylor's drum kit on this recording with Steve's cymbals and his snare drum. Doesn't sound like a 10-inch tom on the track, but I was just really amazed by what he was doing. And then later on, from listening to it and seeing videos and all that sort of thing, I started to figure out exactly what was going on there. And but it's also interesting that you'll hear in a couple of spots there, the beginning of the track and sort of about a third of the way in, he's playing a version of 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. So it was kind of like something you could tell he'd been working on that groove. Was 50 Ways recorded in 78? Was it? I can't remember.
75, isn't it?
Was it 75? Was it?
I'm not sure, but I thought it was earlier than that. Yeah.
Right.
I'll just Google it.
Yeah. But anyway, it was sort of. Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of interesting to hear. And at the time, I obviously didn't know. At 8 years old, I hadn't heard of 50 Ways to Leave Your Love a Track. I didn't know anything about it, but this pattern was carefully crafted and just flowed seamlessly into the rest of it. I think the other thing that was really impressive about this track that was really different from other drummers was the splashing of the hi-hats and playing 16ths on the bells of the cymbals or splashing the hi-hat, and also the bass drum on 2 and 4 was kind of, I thought that was pretty a new thing, and then hitting the tom instead of the snare drum on the backbeat. I didn't know anything about samba music or anything like that, so I thought it sounded great. I didn't know anything about it, but there's just a whole bunch of things that are thrown in on that track that is a good mix of all the things that you hear on a bunch of other things that he's done. But and there's some good improvising on there. Art Farmer, I think, and Hubert Laws. I think Gary King is on bass. Of course, Bob James. So
cool.
Play a bit of the track if you want.
Yeah, let's have a listen. Somebody got speakers on?
Here.
Yeah. So what are you other guys what's your takes on this?
I'd just say it's the beginning of all those signatures that we've heard.
Yeah.
It's like him forming all that stuff.
Well, it really points at how much I think I take for granted that he came up with. I mean, like there's the obvious things, but you sort of mentioned the bass drum in 2 and 4, and I thought, yeah, you're right. I've forgotten that the first time I heard that was him as well. And the bell on the ands playing the 16ths.
Yeah.
That's very signature to him. I don't know if anyone did it before him, but he certainly made it his own and made it, and everybody copied it from him.
Yeah.
And for me, he was the first drummer that I heard that, like Lance said, played the backbeat on a floor tom.
Right. Yeah.
I guess the other thing that's a real classic Steve Gadd signature, and again, it's just that one of those things that I don't recall ever hearing until I heard Steve Gadd doing, was playing a crash cymbal that was unsupported by the bass drum.
Bass drum.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that bit too. Yeah, that was in there. Yeah.
I only ever did it by mistake.
or a busted pedal.
Yeah. But this bit here is
Yeah,
quite
here's the
good.
floor. Here's the floor tom, eh?
Yeah.
I just really love the warmth of that recording, eh?
Yeah, that's recorded beautifully.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Production.
it's almost like there's an old. They've got a Fairchild compressor, and this part, that part there, I can hear the compressor hitting really, really hard.
Yeah.
And it's almost like.
Here's the last bit. It's got the
Yeah.
So good.
it's just so in time and
One of the tracks you took, we're going to listen to of yours, Gordy, was the Way Back Home. When I was telling you I was watching the live version of it,
Yeah.
and seeing him do this, the two-handed, the right on the bell, and like I've always sort of just gone, just sort of switched it over, but he's kind of doing like a 16th from his snare straight up to the hi-hat.
Yes.
You know, you have to see it, you know.
Yeah.
He does that same thing too when he plays 16ths on the like a two-handed 16th hi-hat pattern.
Yeah.
And he doubled so the left hand plays the 2 and 4 on the hi-hats as well. So it's going you know, with the backbeat.
Yeah.
And just so there's not a 16th missing on 2 and 4 on the hats. It's, you know, I mean, it's
and that's what's happening on that track too. You know, he's got the left hand playing the backbeat at the same time as, you know, everything else that's going on there. And that's what I could never figure out. But it's also one of the sounds is with his foot as well. The downbeat on the 1 is with the foot, and then the hand is playing the E and the R and the, you know, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Since we're talking about that, then I might go to one of Gordy's tracks now, since we're talking about this specific thing here. And it's Way Back Home, and it's the album version of that song. Can you talk a little bit, Gordy, a little bit about that?
You know, you'll attest that when you asked us to choose 2 Steve Gadd songs.
By the way, I said choose 2. Gordy sent me 500 and said I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I've already.
It took a lot of narrowing down, but you know, and I'm still not quite sure. But
No, you did well with this one.
Yeah, I reckon too.
well, this was the 2 I've chosen. I guess that, you know, I often use these in my teaching, because this version Way Back Home, it's the ultimate storytelling. The way he unfolds a chapter, it just increases the intensity. You know, every sort of chorus, he just takes it up a notch. It's doing, like, as far as what he's playing, it's the Steve Gadd vocabulary we all know and love, but it's the way he just develops each chorus or each, you know, behind each soloist, and just takes it up a notch. And when Ronnie Cuba comes in, you know, he's just bursting at the seams,
steam train,
and he's shouldering the ride. You know, he's just got this extra weight until it's just a beautiful kind of dramatic build that he plays through this thing, and it's like a textbook big band kind of arrangement, but he's just making it happen from the drum chair. Beautiful.
All right, let's have a listen. You can see him playing this, slouched over, elbows tucked in.
Yeah. I always, you know, if I'm doing it with the students, I say he's just on gear. He's on 1 now. And
Hold tight.
Yeah.
Oh. And the band, you got to give it to the band.
classic Cornell Dupree.
Yeah, that's so good. Oh,
Just that little lilt, the left hand on the hats. And
yeah. I love that. It's a feel later on. That's one little thing where he leaves the two out. Oh, mama.
Tom,
Yeah. It's coming.
What number are we on now?
Oh, he's on about 2 or 3.
He's about 2 or 3, yeah.
3.5 there.
Oh.
This one here, yeah.
This one. Oh! Yeah.
There you go. Take her up a notch.
Yeah.
Goes to the floor, Tom, on the back beat. Just pushing up into overdrive now. There you go. I think I've never had this verified. I think he's double tracked the drum solo here. It's him playing it twice. Like,
right.
Yeah. Because there's little flams.
Yeah.
That's just
It's a different snare drum. Almost like he's playing us.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
I've never had that verified. I've
Okay.
always just suspected it's him playing twice.
And the snare changes here. After this.
I love he comes out of here, doesn't hit a crash on one. Check this out.
See?
Oh,
Different
yeah.
snare drum there, see?
All right.
You missed it.
That just gets me in the guts, that thing, man.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, it's cool. Yeah, like I was saying, I saw a couple of live versions of this. And yeah, like I said, saw that the two-handed, actual seeing the ride and the hi-hat thing happening. Just the way it controls the time too, you know?
Yeah.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
Two things. I would give anything to hear that drum track isolated by itself. I often think that when I'm hearing, great tunes that I love, I'd love to hear actually just what it sounds like without everything else, just to see how that feels, that would be incredible. But the other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, on the live versions of this tune, doesn't he plays a solo at the end with just Cornell playing that vamp, right?
Right.
And every time I've heard that, it's been kind of burnt into my mind. It's like any time I've ever played a solo with somebody playing a vamp, I'm always terrified I'm going to speed it up or slow it down. And it's just like every time I've seen those live clips of him doing it with Cornell, it's just Cornell's like sitting on the porch, like, well, I'm not going anywhere, like I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to go with you or anything. I'm just going to play this thing. And it just smokes from beginning to end. And it just sits so comfortably in the pocket with him playing the most beautiful phrases, Anyway, amazing.
Could I just tell you my Peter Erskine story with just speaking of the drama of Steve Gadd? Because I was in LA in early 2002, and Chick Corea was doing a night at the Hollywood Bowl, which was a retrospective of his career. So he'd done the 60th birthday thing, I think, at the Blue Note in New York the year before. And it was a sort of condensed version of that on this one night. So there was four different Chick Corea ensembles on. There was Chick with Gary Burton, Chick with the Electric Band with Dave Weckl and those guys, Chick with the Three Quartets Band with Steve Gadd and Mike Brecker, Eddie Gomez, and Chick with Aeto, Flora Purim and Stanley Clarke. So it was this incredible night, But when the Three Quartets Band came on, Gadd did his solo in the thing, and he played that same vocabulary, the stuff, but it just got you, and the audience just went nuts watching this thing. And I don't mean just drummers, like everybody went crazy seeing Steve Gadd or hearing Steve Gadd do his thing. Even Michael Brecker was standing there, and he must have, stood by thousands of Steve Gadd solos. And even I sort of saw him kind of jump back a bit. It was just beautiful. It was just incredible. Anyway, a couple of days later, I had a lesson with Peter Erskine, and I mentioned I'd been there, and he said, "Oh, how was it?" And I said, "Oh, it was fantastic." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'd meant to get there." And I told him this thing that Steve Gadd just had this magical thing that spoke to the audience, and he said, he goes, "Yeah, man." He said, when I first heard him, I was in my high school band, and we went and heard the Army band, and this was before anybody knew who he was. And he said, they started playing this tune, and it was the Meter Sissy Strut. There's some video of them doing that on the tribute night thing, and he said, but there were two drummers, and the other guy had been playing. Then this guy gets on with the dark eyes, and he said, he said, well, by the time, he said, it starts with 4 bars drums. He said, and by the time he'd hit the second bar, he said, we were on our feet screaming. He said, it was so funky, he said, it was great. And he said, and that's the thing he's got. And he said, it's an innate thing. He's just always had it. He said, what he does is he reaches out and he gets a hold of your guts. And he said, and once he's got it, he twists it. And he won't let go. And he said, it's just this beautiful thing. And I'm sitting there hanging off every word, and I think, oh man, I'm here with Peter Erskine. I better be cool, And I said, oh, that's beautiful, man. But I didn't mean to get you talking about one of your contemporaries, And he said, oh man, he said, I could talk about that cat all day. He said, matter of fact, I got goosebumps just thinking about him.
Oh man, great. That's so great.
Just on Sissy Strut, the video you're talking about, I've got it here. I might play it so we can hear it. I saw this for the first time last night. Right. I was telling you, Gordy, I've been going through watching as many videos as I can in the last week, and this just blew me away. The thing that gets me with this, like he's grooving away, and that horn section, they really start pushing it, and then there's that little section where he gets about a bar, the bar break, and just the bass drum pattern in this just brings it all back to his tempo. You listen to this. Hopefully there's no way. Here we go. That. Just the bass drum pattern of the sound starting to kind of push a little bit, and it just moves it back and goes in. I just needed to get that out.
There's Bonzo in there too, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Those drum sounds. It's almost it reminds me of some hip hop sampled beats. I don't know if they necessarily got it from that, but I'm sure somebody has. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about his sound now. And as we know, like his sound hasn't. How do I put this? You hear a Steve Gadd record today from a Steve Gadd record in the 80s and you know it's him, right, by the sound, right? Let's talk about how he's kind of developed that sound. I was listening to an interview with him not too long ago, and he said he started off on a Gretsch kit with no front heads. He's trying to search for a sound. He didn't like that too much, so he ended up buying a set of Pearl chromatic toms. He tried that, didn't like that either. And then I think he was on a session, and one of the producers says, "Hey, man, why don't you sort of try this with a bottom head on it, with the hydraulics on the top?" And I think from that is where he kind of developed his sound. So, does anyone want to sort of add to that?
Yeah, when I did this thing a few weeks ago, this Zoom thing, he said that Pearl kit, which is the one, I don't know if you've seen that clip. It was recorded probably in the 70s sometime. He's pretty young, and he's playing with that band that has Tony Levin and Mike Manieri. That was was his Pearl kit that he had for ages with those concert toms. And then
Mirage?
because he wanted a 10-inch tom. No one was making 10-inch toms in those days. And so he had those drums modified to have bottom heads put on the on those drums so that he could have a 10-inch tom. And I think he used that kit on a lot of albums prior to the Yamaha thing coming about. But I think at some point he may have had a Gretsch bass drum and those Pearl toms.
Yeah.
And the Ludwig Supra snare drum.
Yeah.
And then, eventually that sort of he got Yamaha to make him, what he wanted. But that's my understanding of that Pearl kit. And I don't know where that ended up. In fact, I don't think he knows where that ended up.
Right.
But he doesn't have it anymore.
Right. Right. I don't know. When I talked to him last year, he said that he still had that somewhere, but he didn't know where it was. And,
oh, cool.
Yeah. It's like, same with like, we were having a discussion about the snare drums, and for some reason he wasn't happy with the two new snare drums that have just been made, with his guidance, and he says, "Oh, have you got anything else?" And I went, "Oh, I've got this old Ludwig, Supra 400 with all the chrome flaking off it. Let's try that." And so he was really into that.
Yeah.
So we just went back to this Ludwig snare drum, and at the end of the tour, he goes, "Can I have that?" I went, "Sure, take it." But I've never seen him use it recently on anything. But he seemed to like it for some reason.
Yeah, I don't think those Yamaha, signature snare drums really capture his sound that we're used to hearing.
Yeah, I've got both of them, and yeah, there's quite a lot of fiddling around to try and make it sound as warm as the Ludwig snare drum. So, yeah.
I agree. I mean, I've got one of the metal ones, one of the early metal ones, and it has a sound, but it's certainly, for me, not for everything. As far as I was concerned, but when I hear him play it, it makes a whole lot of sense. You know, it seems to work. I'm not sure what he's using on the the night where they honoured him, and he plays with James Taylor on that.
Yeah.
Whatever snare drum that is, it just the way he blends that with the band is just it's just glorious. Like it's just and it may well be one of his. I'm not sure. I didn't really check that.
Is that did he have wooden hoops on that one, or was it the steel?
I don't
hoops?
think so.
Yeah,
I think it was steel. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's using like I think it's a brass snare drum.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's what he's using most of the time. It seems to be, but the snare sound has got to be, his signature, one of his main signature sounds. I would think, and then the 10-inch tom and the cymbals. I mean, the hi-hat cymbals that he used.
Yeah,
for
let's
such a long
let's
time.
talk about that for a little bit. I was going to mention the hi-hats when we were listening to that Pure Imagination, and going back to the recording too. The hi-hats in that particular song are quite up in the mix.
Yeah,
and I just love it. Do you know if he's changed? I'm sure he's changed a little bit, but what was he sort of playing in regards to cymbals, hi-hats back in those days to what he's playing now?
We had the old K top, didn't he? Wasn't that his thing? He had an old K top and an A bottom or something.
Yeah, I mean, from what I can figure out, it looks like he busted a bunch of those cymbals. If you look at that Grover Washington video, that you were talking about, every cymbal has got a crack in it, right?
Yeah, yes.
And including the top edge of the hi-hat cymbal. So I think I think he switched the bottom cymbal and put that on the top because the top one was cracked. And then I think that cracked bottom hi-hat wound up being the sizzle cymbal that sits on top of, I mean, he was the first guy that came up with a cymbal stack as well, I think, and he told me that was a 19-inch A Zildjian that was the stack over there with the 14-inch hi-hat sitting on the top of it. So, and he says he doesn't use that 14-inch K anymore because where you put the clutch in has sort of worn in such a way that the cymbals won't sit properly together. So that's why he's gone to that A custom on the top.
And isn't he using his bottom hi-hat has rivets in it?
Yeah. So he's got like, and it's like a crash cymbal, like a 14-inch A custom crash with rivets in it that sometimes he uses on his left, as a sizzle cymbal. But, and I said, why do you have the heavy cymbal on the top? He says, well, it's the definition, that you get out of the stick. And I think that's the whole reason why he played the sticks back to front, with the tips, at the butt end of the grip, because you can get more definition out of the bell of the cymbal and the top of the hi-hat, which I think, you can hear when he's playing those two-handed patterns on that old K Zildjian cymbal. To get a decent, chimey sound out of it, you have to use the butt end of the stick, is what I could gather from that,
I guess that's the thing I love. I just love how incredibly unconventional he chooses to be in the pursuit of getting a sound. When I saw Up Close for the first time, which was a copy of a copy of a copy, so the picture quality wasn't great, but it was still enough to see that thing of playing with the butt end of the sticks, dead sticking the ride cymbal. Yeah. It was the first time I ever saw a zero ring on a snare drum, and so I made one immediately, and all of a sudden my snare drum sounded unbelievable.
I recall the when he was out here a couple of times ago, the guy who was teching for him, I've forgotten his name, but he said he'd get him to set the ride cymbal up so it would hit the tom He said, because I like it kind of swishing around. I like it kind of muddying the waters. And I always had this image of him from the recordings I knew of being this really kind of clean, precise studio guy.
Yeah.
Which of course he is. But I remember Toby Hall went to New York and heard him up close one time and came back and Toby's kind of a jazz guy, and he said he's much more of a jazz drummer than anybody realizes, up close, because he's getting so much nuance out of the drum kit, getting so much texture and color. It's not like, which you don't really hear on the records, you don't always hear, and it's so dynamic, and he plays in different places on the ride cymbal, and it's a real color, like a real textural thing,
Well, since we're talking about the Steve Gadd as a jazz player, Hamish, we might go to one of your songs.
I wish it was one of my songs.
I mean, one of your selections. It's Teabag by Steps Ahead. You want to tell us a little bit about this? We won't play the whole thing because it's about 3 hours long.
Yeah, it is about 3 hours, but it's a great 3 hours.
Yeah, I know.
It's well worth a listen in the liner notes or wherever you put it, Stevie. But I do remember this record, Smoking at the Pit, coming to light in the middle of, all of our love affair with Steve Gadd. I think, like it was almost like you couldn't have heard enough. And then this record came out, and there was two vinyl albums. It's a double album, and it's just unbelievable. Like, the whole record is incredible. And this particular track, I mean, it's an incredible band, Don Grolnick and Brecker. And on this particular track, it's a bit like Way Back Home. It's like he just grows Brecker goes first, and then there's piano solo, or Mike Manury plays a vibe solo, I can't remember, but Brecker just takes it right over the edge, and Gadd's it's just boiling behind him. And actually the thing that really sort of blows my mind, it's like when I first heard Elvin Jones, it was that same sort of depth of feeling that kind of changed my life. And Gadd's the same, it's like his personality and his sound. And on this track, like the way he builds the whole thing, and it's just unbelievable. In the little notes I made, I at one point when I was listening to it, I just thought, God, can you imagine actually sitting in front of it? Like the whole band, I mean, like in particular Brecker's solo, it's out of sight. And the tune's great too, and it's not a heavy piece of music, it's just grooving its ass off all the way through. Anyway, hit it, Stevie. Two of them.
What are you hearing, man? What are you hearing?
I always play this to my students as a great example of just playing unison quarter notes on the ride cymbal, hi-hat, and the bass drum. And, like, no skip note, but, man, it's swinging, you know?
Yeah. The dependent drummer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great track, you know, just on so many different levels of accompanying and energy and... man, it's a great track, that one too. Yeah, the whole album, like I say, I love it.
And also the sort of the feel, like he goes between like the double thing and the half thing all the time. It's sort of like, you know, like he's either hitting 2 and 4, he's hitting a big 3. You know, like he's
It's the tension thing, isn't it? It's the releasing and it's the messing with you. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. For me. And I don't know if I want to, you know, go too far into that, but I know he copped a lot of. There was a bit of sort of backlash from the traditional jazzers when he had, you know, had so much success.
Yeah.
Hey?
Really? Is that right?
I think so. In the 80s, there was a...
And Brecker too.
Yeah, there was this thing. But to me, it personifies where his priorities lie, because to me, he's a jazz guy. You know, he started out as a jazz guy. He's a jazz guy. You know, but the you know, in order to make it, he's not afraid to play a backbeat. You know, there's enough jazz tradition in there. There's plenty of jazz tradition in there, but he doesn't. In order to do whatever to make it groove harder, he'll do it. If it needs a backbeat, it's the same on his the In Session DVD, you know, video, where he plays the brushes thing, and he just ends up kind of stomping fours because it's the only place to go harder, like to dig in harder than he is. And to me, it's demonstrative of the fact that it's grooving at all costs. It's like you know, it doesn't. You can break whatever rules you like as long as in order to groove. You know, that's what I hear. You know. Does
anyone know where that crossover came from jazz into pop for him?
Well, I know. I know when he first got to New York and heard Rick Marotta, the Rick's groove made a big impression on him and all that. But I think you know, I mean, he always grooved. You know, like he says that, but he always, you know, sound like that Sissy Strut's pretty funky to me. To me, you know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure at university he was playing every kind of style imaginable, and that was in the late 60s, you know. And he's always said that he just wanted to make a living from playing the drums, so he didn't care what the music was, whether it was jazz or blues or reggae or funk or whatever, you know. He was into it, and those early recordings he did was on the CTI label, playing on that Chet Baker album with Paul Desmond and that.
Ron Carter.
Ron Carter, and I'm pretty sure like
Bob James.
Well, they were going for that sound that sort of paved the way for smooth jazz, which was, you know, that deep toms and muffled bass drum and all that sort of stuff. So I didn't really get around to asking him, but I'm imagining that the sound of his drums was the thing that was the crossover, and he kind of like stayed with that sound because that's where the work was. He wasn't going to switch out his different, you know, jazz drum kit if he was playing with a jazz group, you know. And I think that's the thing that attracted me to his drumming, was that he stayed with kind of a pop sound but was playing jazz, you know. And in the 80s, that was pretty radical, you know. Yeah. Like you said, the traditional jazz guys kind of went, not really into that, you know, because it sounded too funky, you know. Yeah.
Darryn, you got anything to add?
I mean, there's one of the things that I've heard him talk about in terms of what also influenced his sound was Chick Corea, and because him and Chick were good friends, sort of growing up, that, Chick sort of made Steve aware of the approach that drummers like Alvin Jones and Tony Williams took. And so Chick was really showing Steve how those guys played. Chick had real insight into how, guys like Alvin and Tony played. And so Chick had a massive influence on the approach that Steve took to playing drums in terms of modernizing his approach and also his sound. Because, like we said earlier, if you listen to that, there's a live Chuck Mangione album from probably early 70s, maybe 71 or 72, and Steve's got the little Gretsch kit, the sort of typical kind of jazz setup. And so that was his thing. And then I think Chick really influenced him about and sort of suggested, hey man, this is what the modern cats are doing. And and I've heard that from Steve's mouth. That I think that was also a very pivotal point in Steve's development in terms of him coming into his own and becoming Steve Gadd. Because, one of the things I was going to say before, Steve's sound really does influence the overall sound of a recording. The sort of dead toms and the snare drum with the zero ring and all that sort of stuff. The way his sound sits in a mix and even sort of influences the overall mix and sound of the recording. It's just it blows my mind, and I think that's something that a lot of people probably are not so aware of, or at least sort of, give some serious consideration to, because Steve used one snare drum and pretty much had one snare drum sound. You don't hear an album with Steve Gadd on it and think, all right, on this track he's going to have a really tight cranking snare drum, and then on this track he's got the real deep. It was one sound kind of fits all. Let's say. I mean, obviously there are variations in all of that stuff, but to me, nothing radical. He had a great sound, and like you said, Lance, once he settled on that was it.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah,
I thought we were going to see do you guys know that Joe Sample record?
Yeah.
Did you feel that?
Yeah.
I know one of those records.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a pretty radical change of sound for him. He's got jazzy sounding toms and
ambassador tops, and he did sort of do that later on.
Yeah,
and with James Taylor as well. Like he's kind of. It's almost like his tuning went up.
It's more open, isn't it? Yeah. It's more,
What's the Joe Sample album?
Did you feel that? And the first song is called Mystery Child.
I remember I was talking to Weckel about how Steve's tom sound changed, like on that album that you're talking about there, and Dave kind of says that when they did that Master Plan album where it was Steve and Dave doing trades, and that I think is when Dave switched to Ambassadors as well, and so he kind of thinks that that's where Steve got the idea, and that must have been in like 1990 or 89 or something when they did Master Plan. So I'm not sure when did that Joe Sample album come out? Was that?
Oh, that's 2000, I think, or like late 90s or 2000. It's quite later, yeah.
Yeah, but he's.
But to me, that was a big change. I hadn't heard him do that.
So sorry, Gordy. What was the song that
Mystery Child? Have I surreptitiously got another song choice here?
I reckon, yeah.
I don't know how you've done this. Oh, okay, I got you. I can hear the snare straight away. Yeah.
Well, check out the tom when he does his fill.
Is that album the same, or is that?
That's the sound of that record.
Yep.
I do remember thinking, like, you know, if there was some unknown guy who only ever played that album, you'd go, man, that guy's heavy. You know? That's. I feel that's kind of late in the day. That's probably 20 years old now, but you know, I feel that's sort of late in the Gadd kind of career. You know?
So how do you think that particular sound came about? Producer's call?
Oh, well, I don't know. He, in a lot of these interviews, he gives credit to his 70s sounds to producers, a lot, or you know, engineers. But I don't know. You know, you got to start with something. They can't have been changing it that much. I don't know. I guess it's him. I don't think anyone's. You get Steve on a session. I don't think anyone's going, do you want to tune your snare down?
Change your heads.
Very cool.
Yeah, true.
I'll give you some tape.
I think he might be using bigger toms now. So I've seen pictures of him using like a 12-13 setup.
I think that's the Eric Clapton and sometimes James Taylor setup, isn't it? To deeper toms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine Steve without a 10-inch tom. It's sort of it's heartbreaking.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You know the stuff on the Stuff Live in Japan record. On the cover of that, he's playing three rack toms. And
yes, that's right.
Is one of those an 8?
I thought that's what I thought. Yeah, 8, 10, 12. I guess 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Is that what?
There you go. Well, that's what I wondered, you know, and I thought, that precedes Weckl using an 8, right? But, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't last long though, did it?
No, he probably picked that kid up in Japan, you know.
I got an 8 up there.
Yeah, I've got
I got one too.
That's my Weckl 8.
Yeah.
I've hit it. I've tried to hit it about 1,000 times, and I've hit it about 10 times.
I've got a shelf full of them, mate.
And a whole bunch of unused Remo 8-inch heads.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do I do with these?
Yeah. They make good plates, you know.
When was the last time you used a 13-inch tom?
Never.
I used one on a recording session for a Kate Sobrano album about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and only because. You know, only because I managed to score myself one of those classic 60s Ludwig kits, you know, 22, 13, 16.
Yeah.
And it's the only time, it's probably the first time since the early 80s that I've had a 13-inch tom.
I use a 13 quite a bit.
All right.
Sorry. Yeah, on my Gretsch kit.
I remember the first Yamaha kit I got, you know, was because Steve had 10, 12, 13, 14 is what it said in the Yamaha catalogue. So I went and bought, you know, a 13 by 9 floor tom and a 14 by 10, you know, because that's what Steve used. And then none of the photos seemed to look like that. But, yeah, they got that 13 out of me. So,
yeah. I think now, I mean, Darryn and Lance, you guys have both talked about your interactions with Steve. So maybe let's talk now about those times and the times that you've met him and conversed with him. And myself, I haven't actually met him. I saw him play at the Basement in 2016. Is that right? Last time he was here with Steve Gadd Band.
That was the previous time. Up before the trio.
Before the trio gig thing. Yeah. So that's the first and only time I've seen him play live. So I can't speak too much apart from what I saw and what I can say, that concert and his playing, it's almost like a video and movie in my head. Like I can almost see that whole concert in my head. Just seeing him there, and it was a little bit of fanboy, you know. Yeah. And that's why I just watched him. But what I can say though is these last few weeks, researching for this and all the videos that I've seen, seeing like those really early videos of him that he played like that back then. Like, you know, as obviously as people get older, their techniques change and, you know, their the way they sit change. I didn't see that too much with him. Probably more I saw him play a little bit less traditional grip and more match grip. But still, you know, that that left hand, his left hand is right at the butt of that stick that whole time, and he's playing open and his arms are almost sort of winged when he's kind of letting go. But then when he was playing really quiet, it's that crouched over, elbows tucked in, and seeing, like I said, seeing those old videos from, late 70s and 80s, seeing him play like that, it was just awesome.
I mean, I've been fortunate to see him play, more than 10 times with a whole bunch of different people. I saw him, I think the first time I saw him play was at the Buddy Rich Memorial Scholarship Concert when I was in New York, which was great because everyone was playing on that. That was amazing. Wow. And then I saw him play at a club in New York. I've seen him play in Japan. I saw a great gig in Japan with him, it was him, Will Lee, Bob James, and a couple of other dudes playing all this sort of late 60s, early 70s CTI catalogue, which was fantastic. Great. But the first time I met him was at a gig in a club in New York, and I was having drum lessons at the Drummers Collective at the time, and there was a whole sort of bunch of us goofy kids, at this gig to watch Steve play, and we spent sort of half of the time watching Steve Gadd play, and then the other half of the time sort of just looking at each other with, raised eyebrows and surprised looks on our faces, that thing that you do. And so I remember after he finished his set, he was leaving the club and he was walking up the stairs with his cymbal bag over his shoulder and a stick bag in one hand and a snare drum case in the other hand. And I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to walk up to him and say hello. And I was about 21, 22 at the time. And as he was walking up, I said, "Oh, hi, Steve. My name's Darryn. I'm a drummer from Melbourne, and I'm a massive fan." And he put his stuff down. He just dropped everything and shook my hand and had a chat. And there was like total fanboy experience for me.
Yeah,
it was amazing. And so I've met him a few times, but there was one time in particular. That when he was out here with with James Taylor for the first time, and a friend of ours had organised to meet up with him and have a coffee at Starbucks. We're in Melbourne, which is like a coffee capital, and he wants to go to Starbucks anyway. And I remember the three of us plus Steve, sitting outside, and I was sitting next to Jerry, and it was February, so I was copping all of this sun. And I said to Jerry, "Hey, mate, can you move over a little bit, man? I'm just getting blasted with all this sun." And Steve Gadd gets up and says, "No, it's all right, man. You sit here. I'll sit there." Like he gave me his seat, and leading up to this experience, I was getting dressed and I'm freaking out, going, "Oh, what should I wear? I'm going to meet Steve Gadd." It was like I was going out on my first date. It was so funny. And then I've got my best shirt on, and then Steve, we go to the lobby to meet Steve Gadd, and Steve Gadd comes down the stairs, and he's sort of in his running shoes, his running outfit, and he'd just been for a run along the Yarra, and I was just sort of blown out by how normal he is. Now, like all of us, we've met a lot of great drummers. I've met a lot of really great drummers, and I've got to say, I don't really, just because of my personality, I don't necessarily feel comfortable around these people. I feel really intimidated, except for him. He just, I don't know, he's just a normal human being, and he just has a way of making you feel comfortable.
I've got to ask you, Darryn, is that the seat you're sitting on?
Sorry?
Sorry.
The
one that Steve gave you.
I stole it. I stole it along with his coffee cup.
Yeah.
He's remarkably humble and with every interview you see, and these days we get to see interviews rather than just read them. You can see like he thinks about every answer. And everything's a gem. Everything's like there's nothing superfluous that he says that's throwaway or not thought out, and he's extremely generous and humble, you know. And I watched that the tribute night, honoring him in preparation for this, just to get me in the vibe, as if I needed to. But you know, there's guys up there heaping praise on him, and the way he accepts it with this, there's not an ounce of sort of falseness about him. He's just generous to a fault. It's beautiful. It's humility. It's just
it's almost like he is completely unaware of the incredible impact of his music on all of us. You know, it's just all taken in his stride. This is what I do.
Yeah, I think he is aware, but he manages somehow to. For me, I think he manages to be aware and yet be generous and humble. And, you know, I mean, the first time I met him, you know, it was like a lineup thing at a drum clinic, and I shook his hand and said, look, man, you know, just want to say you've had such an impact. And he said, you know, he heard my accent. He said, oh, you where are you from? I said, Australia. He said, oh, you working here? And he was like, straight away, it's about me. And I was like, hang on, you know, like I want to talk about you. But, you know, he must get sick of it too. But he seems to have all the time in the world. And, you know, he's very, very generous.
Yeah.
Beautiful guy.
I've had two meetings with him. The first one was complete fanboy. It was James Taylor's gig at the State Theatre in Sydney, and Larry Goldings was playing with him. They were doing 3 nights. I'd bought a ticket. My sister bought me a ticket for the second night for my birthday, and we did a gig with Larry Goldings at Winebank. And Larry said, well, you probably don't want a ticket. And I went, are you kidding? You know, so I went 3 times, and Larry said, come down. He said, come back at intermission, because when James is on for the last tune, Steve's walking back to the hotel, because James was doing a solo tune last tune, just vocal and guitar. And I was like, oh, I don't know about that. You know, like I'm not very good with that stuff. I sort of get nervous and the whole thing, you know, I do. And I've also had some bad experiences. But Chad Wackerman was sitting in front of me, and he said he's coming back in intermission. And I went, oh, you know, okay, well, if you're going, I'll come with you. So we went, and Greg Johns was with us, and I walked ahead nervously, and I walked backstage. I know the State Theatre backstage, and I walked into the sort of big room. I mean, there's not a lot of room backstage. There was a kind of big room, and there was James Taylor leaning over a coffee urn doing this sort of inhalation thing in between sets, and standing beside him was Jackson Browne. Both like I had, you know, I went through all that music back in the day, and I just looked at them like, and sort of looked to the left, and I could see Steve sitting on a couch with Larry, and they both stood up, and I just walked past James and Jackson like, right. And then I walked up to Steve, and I just, you know, Larry said, this is Hamish, he's a drummer from Sydney. And I was like, and I can't even remember what we spoke about. And then that's how nervous I was. And then Greg Johns came up, and I remember he said something like, are you having a good time in Sydney? And I thought, why didn't I say that? And anyway, so that was, you know, and then I left and watched the rest of the show, and it was amazing. You know, it was just exquisite, because I love the music, and of course I love the rhythm section, the whole thing. Anyway, so years and years later, a couple of years ago, I'm in New York. My wife is running the marathon there, and I have been sort of with her when she's running marathons, and I don't want to kind of upset that apple cart, but Chick Corea was on at the Blue Note as part of his birthday thing, and he was doing the 3 quartets with Steve and Eddie Gomez, and I'm like, we will be going out on the Saturday night, you know, on the Friday night or whatever it is. So we wind up there, and I'm literally sitting behind Steve sideways on the stage, and we have this table literally behind him. I could almost lean forward and touch him on the shoulder.
I would have.
Which thankfully I didn't. Yeah, I know. And it was just amazing. I mean, I've got tons of video of all this stuff, but at the end, and I told Gordy the story the other day when we were talking on the phone, and I actually said that he came down the 2 steps from the bandstand at the end of the gig, and he hugged me, but actually I think I hugged him. But it was really beautiful. We stood and we talked for quite a long time with his back to the rest of the room. And as we chatted, and he was incredibly generous, and I was actually able to talk about stuff. It was just before his band was going to Sydney again, and I said it's all sold out and all that stuff. So he's really happy about that. And we're chatting away, and slowly, I mean, he had to walk around the stage and up the stairs to the band room, and slowly formed a queue behind him, of which he hadn't noticed because he was facing me and we're chatting, of about 40 people. And so that when he turned to walk away from me, it was like the first of about 40 people before he was going to get to the band room. And he just did everybody at their leisure. He wasn't sort of hassling. And then at the end of the night, the girls were upstairs in the loo, and they said he came out, these kids sitting outside the band room, and he came out looking around, said, "Hi, fellas," and they wanted him to sign their snare drums and all that. He was just like, yeah, sweet. I think he's incredibly humble, and I think he is totally aware of his, what he's done. And as Gordy and I were chatting the other day, he's a guy who's done all the work. He's an incredible musician, and fortune has smiled on him in some way, like whatever that sort of magic thing that is added to incredible talent that makes you that level of performer. And I think he's really aware of that, and I think he's very grateful, and he's happy to give back as much as he can, which is amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's a funny thing because, I may be wrong in saying this, but, to me, he sort of is the father of modern drumming in the sense that, if we look at the people that followed him, the other big names of the world, like the Weckels and the Vinnies and, and on it goes, he was really the founder of that particular approach to drumming. And I think the only other person to have done that prior to that might have been Tony Williams, 10 or 12 years before Steve Gadd's impact. And it just amazes me that him, of his generation, I don't know if it's his upbringing or whatever, but he doesn't have that air of arrogance about him or that sort of... I mean, he is an incredibly impenetrable human being as far as his personality and his musicality goes, but he just does not seem to rest on that in order to, justify his presence in the, sort of historical sense of what he's done musically for all of us. And that's the thing that knocks me out about him. I've met, I'm not going to name drop, but, I've met just about every famous drummer that you could imagine, as they were passing through. And not many of those guys make me feel comfortable to be around.
Yeah.
And he just seems normal. Like hanging out with him is like hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, he certainly he pretty much had nothing to prove since about 1980, but he went on to prove a lot anyway. I think I guess his place in history is assured. Like from whatever angle you look, there's so many. We've talked about the innovations. Didn't he invent the hanging floor tiles too? Wasn't that his thing? I mean,
really? Is that right?
Yeah, that's him.
Oh wow!
So I mean, like there's the playing, there's the sounds, there's the equipment approach. There's the work ethic that like this, like, and then it's one thing, I think we said this when we spoke, Stevie, like it's one thing to have played on a lot of records. It's another thing to have played on a lot of world-breaking great records, like records that changed the world, And I mean, God, it doesn't stop with him. And as I say, like that, even that Mystery Child, like, or I think October Road, like if a drummer came along and the only thing he ever did was October Road, you'd go, this guy is as heavy as anybody, and that's just one sort of slight, like late-ish in the piece thing that he did in his stellar career, so it's really remarkable. I know. Sorry, mate. Go on.
No, you finish.
Oh, it's just a funny story. That you remember Mick Lamb at Billy Hyde's,
Yeah.
Mick told when Steve was out here with Paul Simon, and one of the percussionists from Paul Simon had been coming into Billy Hyde's in Sydney and hanging out, and he said, "I'll bring Steve in," So there was a whole bunch of people there to meet Steve, and and he comes in on this day, and there's all these cats around, and the percussionist is going around introducing him to everybody, and there he is, and he's standing right in front of the big Yamaha Steve Gadd poster. He introduces him to Mick. And he says, "Oh, Mick, I'd like you to meet Steve." And Mick puts out his hand and goes, "Steve, And he laughed at, like, and he took it in the spirit, and it was beautiful,
Mick told me another funny story about. I don't know if it was that exact same day, but Steve went and got had to pick out some sticks. Do you know about this?
No, go on.
So Steve had to pick out some drumsticks, his black signature model Vic Firth sticks, and he takes them to the counter. And there's this young kid working behind the counter who obviously just didn't know who Steve Gadd was, and sort of puts it in the till, rings up a price, and says, these are this much. And Steve Gadd pulls out his credit card, with the name Steve Gadd on it and all this sort of stuff. And Mick just ran to the counter and said, "What the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing?"
Poor kid.
I had similar thing in Wellington too, because I was driving Steve around for like a week, looking after him, and we go into the local rock shop, is the chain of music stores in New Zealand, and he says, I need to get some moon gel, those blue moon gel things. I need to get some of those, And I was like, okay, well, let's go in and only the manager knew who Steve Gadd was, and and they were going, "Oh, can we help you?" And he was ready to, he was reaching for his wallet to pay for these moon gel things, and again, the manager runs over. "Oh, no!" So that was quite funny.
Man.
But the same day, Steve goes, "Hey, I like those boots you're wearing. Where'd you get those from?" And these are like cheap $100 boots from Hallenstein's clothing, thing. And I go, just down here. We have a walk down Cuban Wall. We'll see if we. So here I'm going shoe shopping with Steve Gadd,
Yeah. Hey, Lance, let's talk about your experience with Steve, because you had a unique experience where, like you said, you kind of looked after him for a while he was in New Zealand. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, this was last year, and it was just, we were really lucky that Roger Fox managed to find a gap in his schedule, and Steve's schedule, that he could come out to New Zealand, for a week. And like you said, he was just like everything that you guys have all said, just generous, and was like down to earth. Was nothing was a problem, and if he needed something, he would just ask it like anyone would ask for anything. There was none of this, where's this, where's that kind of thing, and this isn't happening. And he just went with it. He was really happy to just go along with it. And, and I mean, I got to, I was like you guys, real nervous about, I'm driving Steve Gadd around and I'm feeling, really nervous about driving someone so famous around in the car and all that sort of thing, and hoping nothing bad happens. But everything just went smoothly and had a great time. And you always wished you'd ask him this question or that question after he's gone, But being able to just hang out with him and watch him play every night, setting up the gear, and just watching how he would tune the drums and just little details like that was like they say, there's nothing like actually being there and seeing them play, and hearing them like he was playing with a big band, and watching that right behind him was just unbelievable, So I had a great time. I could definitely die now, and I would have ticked everything off in the bucket list, So and like Darryn, I've met a lot of the same drummers that you've probably met as well, and had to be the roadie and driven them around and all that sort of thing, and not naming any names, but yeah, Steve was definitely the easiest, no problems kind of guy, had time for everybody, and just a genuine person and very humble, and it's great.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode of the podcast. As you know, the Gig Life podcast is free. You don't have to pay anything ever. But if you find the value in the Gig Life podcast, you can donate or leave a tip. Go to thegiglifepodcast.com, click on that donate button, and give as little or as much as you like. And just know that anything you give will go back into creating great content for this podcast. All right, back to the episode. I just saw you pull the mic over. I thought.
Yeah, I forgot. It went out of my head.
All right, let's listen to another song now. We'll listen to Darryn. We'll listen to one of yours now.
Okay. Well,
now what's your preference?
Let's go.
Yep.
Let's go with What Do You Want? And there's a reason that I want to play this, was because when I first heard this as a 15-year-old, the introduction, the snare drum introduction, blew my mind, and it still does. Just because you can hear every note of his double stroke roll. I mean, it's just like you could just pick out any of those 30-second notes. They're just so well defined and so well articulated, and so there's that introduction, which is great. And then in the middle section, there's a little kind of section where Steve Gadd's kind of playing a whole bunch of fills on top of a samba bass drum pattern, which, again, it's still to this day, after all of these years, decades, still gets me super excited, to say the least. So there's a synth guitar intro first, and then we hear Steve.
when did this come out, Darryn?
I think this was about 77 or something, 77, 78, something like that. You know, I mean, I didn't hear it then for the first time. I heard it probably when I was about 15. And, it's pretty much all I listened to for a long time.
Is this the same album that your other song, French Toast, is
No,
off?
that's
No?
French Toast is off Feel the Night, which came out in 79.
Okay.
It's pretty amazing. Like the cowbell is going to be, Steve is like the only drummer that I can think of that really pioneered with the cowbell, you know. Sure, you've got John Bonham, you know, smacking away on, you know, that, but
He did it in a way that wasn't corny.
Yeah. Because like there's no other drummers around that same era or before that ever used the cowbell in a really, you know, meaningful musical way. There's one thing I did ask Steve. I said, so when did you start using the cowbell? And he said it was Chick Corea's My Spanish Heart was when he dusted it off and pulled it out. You know, it was like, wow, you know.
Wow.
So, yeah, pretty amazing.
This is that section I was telling you about.
Let's talk a little bit about his sort of Latin style, the Mozambique type.
Can I just say,
of course.
sorry, before we go there, sorry to...
No, all good, man.
The thing that strikes me listening to that, and everything we've heard, you got to remember, this is probably like anything kind of pre-1990 is recorded on tape, where I know, you know, that's complex music and there's a lot going on, and I know, you know, we all do recording and we can all play complex songs, but there's something in knowing that we'll just do another one, you know, or I would, you know, we'll drop in, you know, like drop-ins were doable, but and tape splices were doable, but it was a big deal to do it, and you know, like there's a different. I know there's a when you talk to cats from that who recorded a lot in that period, there's a different ethic about getting it in one, whereas now you definitely got the there's pressure, but it's not the same, you know. That's he probably played that from start to finish, you know.
Exactly. He played it from start to finish, and it was the perfect take. Whereas these days, you do a take, and then someone says, "All right, okay, let's do another one. Play more fills." All right, you do a take with more fills. Let's do another take where you play more ride cymbal. Okay, and then what you end up hearing as the final result is some kind of, you don't even know how many edits that they did and how they kind of Frankenstein this whole take together. It's just so it's almost like you have to have a little less emotional attachment to what you played in the studio, because when you get that back, it may not be all of what you actually did in that one take.
Yeah. Or you get the obligatory 3 takes and then, okay, we've got it all, now do one for yourself.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I would have done one for myself earlier on, but if it's up to me, I'll just pack up and go home.
And not to mention that after you've done all of those takes, including the one for yourself, then they say, all right, can I just get you to hit each of your toms and each of your cymbals?
And we'll do one for ourselves. Yeah.
No, I'm going to make a sample pack and I'm going to sell it, but thanks.
Sorry, I interrupted, but it strikes me as, you know, a lot of the great recordings we're talking about and we're listening to were done
whole takes,
with a different ethic, a different sort of process, you know, from recording now. It's you know, and I know people do recordings in one take now, but just the sense that it was that much harder to fix up, you know, like that you had to get it all in one, you know.
Yeah. How good were they? Like when I think of the sort of Richie Haywoods and Little Feat, or, you know, all those, and all the stuff that Gadd did back then as well, you know, like, as you say, to actually, the job at hand is to play this 4 minutes smoking.
Yeah.
And we might have to do it again, smoking, and then you can go home.
Can I relay something that Chad told me that Jimmy Johnson had said? Well, maybe Jimmy Johnson had said it. And when they were, I don't know if it was October Road, they were recording one of the records, and he said, you know, they do a bunch of takes, and he said, and Steve would approach each take differerly. So, like, if say it's a 12/8 ballad, he might play it as a sort of, you know, eighths on the hi hat and cross stick on the two and, you know, on the backbeat, and then the next take he might do it on brushes, and then a different approach on the third take. And he said, and any one could be the definitive version. They're all, you know, they're all musically shaping the thing the way it's, you know, perfectly. You know, and you could go like any one could be the one. You know,
makes perfect sense.
Let's talk a little bit about the sort of Latin style he brings into it, and the Mozambique and that kind of stuff. Can you remember the first time you ever heard that sort of thing? And do you know a story of how he kind of developed that or sort of moved that into the way that he started playing, and where he got that music from?
But the first time, that track that we just listened to was the first time I heard that groove.
Yep.
Where he plays that cowbell thing before the guitar solo kicks in. That was the first time I heard him play that, and then for me personally, and then I guess the next thing I heard was Late in the Evening.
Yeah,
right.
He does on that Simon and Garfunkel in Central Park. They play me and Julio down by the schoolyard, and he does. The band stops and they do a break, and he does the Mozambique in that, and it's absolutely killing. You know, like, as you can imagine, like it's so funky. You know, when he comes out. But you know, I didn't know what the hell was going on. But you know, I recognise it there. I don't want to. Because you haven't done one of your songs yet, right?
Oh, we'll get there. It's not as good as your guys' songs.
Well, my second choice was is off. You can play it later, but if that's what it takes, and the reason one of the reasons I chose it is because he uses his Mozambique sticking
one bar
in three different ways. It's the sticking. He uses the same sticking 3 different ways in the song. The first is he plays the sticking between the hats and the cross stick, and with the 2 and 4 on the kick drum in the intro.
Yeah.
Then, beg your pardon. He plays it on the cymbals, between the cymbals with the bass drum on 2 and 4, and then the verses are hi hat and cross stick, same sticking, and then later on he plays the full Mozambique. It's
but
beautiful.
there's one bar in that Gordo, which is when they go to the middle 8 of the song, when there's a stop and whatever, and there's a keyboard sort of brass hit thing, and he plays that one bar on the tom. You'll hear it, man. It's like this classic one bar Steve Gadd Mozambique, man. He's going to throw that shit in anywhere.
Let's listen to that.
It sure works. Is that on the bills? So there it is, cross stick.
Folded up so neat. What once was love is now a letter, lying where she used to sleep. Oh, I thought love was something I could count on, but it took her to show me that love lies right to your face. Love lies. Just when I had faith, it wouldn't let me down. I know that love lies right to the end. Love lies. I know the world will never be the same to me.
Love this fill too coming up between.
What's this emptiness inside me? Where her promise used to be. She said she'd be here to guide me.
Kick on 2 and 4.
I guess now the joke's on me. Oh, I thought love was something like devotion, but it took her to show me that love lies right to your face. Love lies just when I had faith it would let me down. And I learned that love lies right to the end. Love lies. I know the world will never mean the same to me. Just when you think you know what love is about,
Yeah, this is the one.
someone takes your place, and you find that love lies right to your face. Love lies. Oh, just when I had faith it would let me down. I know that love lies right to the end. Love lies. I know the world will never mean the same to me. I know that love.
Yeah.
That's killer, man.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I've hijacked the thing again.
Yeah.
I've got more songs, man.
Yeah. Does everyone know that Al Jarreau tune "Save Me"? It's the Mozambique in that as well. Sort of a funk pattern with the snare on the but it's
What record's that from?
Jarreau.
It's called
Yeah.
Jarreau.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
What's it called? What's it called? Sorry.
Jarreau.
And-
The album's called Jarreau. The track's called Save Me.
Yeah, it's a really cool. I didn't realize it was Mozambique until I was really trying to figure it out, and I thought, actually, there's another version of it. You have to forward it. Just that there's a big slow intro at the top of it, but
Seems so few.
yeah, here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Heaven knows what I've been through, searching for a heart that's true. Is there one in a million? Though I often fail the test, everyone must journey till their quest.
Speaking of Al Jarreau, this is kind of a segue into
There you go.
one of my songs. Since you buggers are
Yeah, I've
no, I'm just kidding.
pushed in.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Whose podcast is this?
It's ours. It's ours.
I'll go to the quiet corner for a minute, sorry.
My first song is "We're in This Love Together" by Al Jarreau. This is a song that I played in that band there with my father, with the Gadd sticks and the hydraulic heads and my black power beat drum kit. Now, just after the first chorus, it kind of breaks down, and there's a classic Gaddism in there. Now, I didn't know how to play this, but I worked out my own way of playing it.
As you do.
But, my dad and the guitarist and the bass player used to just let me take their heads.
Steve
So they've got
Gadd's
the
not
sticks,
going
man.
so good today.
I remember you spoke about this lick in the Jeff Porcaro one. You know.
Oh, did I? Oh, right.
Yeah, you mentioned it there,
Oh.
and I know the exact one you mean.
Yeah.
Because it's it's a beautiful little thing, and
Yeah. It's classic Gadd.
yeah.
And this one, if we look at production of this album and this song, it's a little bit more polished. The drums seem a little bit more crisper, and I think possibly that's from a producer, but it's classic Gadd right from the intro. So I'll just play it now. And that 10-inch tom, there's like getting towards the end of the song, there's this little part where he just hits that tom on its own, and it's glorious.
Yeah.
It's like a diamond ring, it's a precious thing. And we never want to lose it. It's like a favorite song that
This
we
fell into
love
the first
to
chorus.
sing.
Yeah.
Every time we hear the music, and we're in this love together, we got the kind that lasts forever. We're in this love together,
Floor time.
and like berries on the vine, it gets sweeter all the time.
There you go.
Here it comes.
It's like a rainy night and candlelight.
Just keep lifting the needle, man, trying to work out.
Well, all I did was I just alternated hands and just went.
We got the whole thing working out so right. Yes. And it's just the way we planned it. We're in this love together. We got the kind that lasts forever. Don't you know that we're in this love together? And like berries on the vine, get sweeter all the time.
I don't know if you've seen the video for this, but I don't know if it's the other guys in the band, but the drummer, because once I found out it was Steve Gadd, I wanted to see him play it in the video, but the actual drummer is he's like blacked out,
Right.
so that broke my heart.
You know we're in this love together.
So the little
We got
10-inch
the
tom
kind
fill's
that
coming
lasts
up.
forever.
Coming up soon.
We're in this love together. We got a kind that will last forever and evermore. Don't you know we're in this love together? We got the kind that will last forever. Tell you that we're in this love together. We're going to find that love has opened up
He's
the
in
door.
very good company.
Hey, hey, hey.
You know, with Michael McDonald and
Yeah.
Oh,
Jarreau.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
like, I mean, great songs and
Yeah.
beautiful.
Great producers
beautiful
too, man.
singers
Like
and-
you know,
yeah,
all the
incredible
Jay Graydon
producers.
produced stuff is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The drum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Beautiful sounding
Yeah.
recordings and great arrangements.
yeah.
That flutter lick he plays
Yeah.
at the end there, that's also on the concert in Central Park, Simon and Garfunkel,
Right.
at the end of 50 Ways
Yeah.
to Leave Your Lover. And I remember, and the drums are really fat and they're sort of echoey and on that thing. And I remember hearing that for the first time and like flipping out over that. I couldn't.
I did.
didn't know what he
I
was
did the same, Gordon, and I remember trying to work.
Yeah.
I spent a year trying to work that out. You know, before I knew what was going on. I had to leave the room for a second. But the other thing about that track, Stevie, that we just listened to, was that flutter lick that he does going into the second verse as a cross stick.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
right.
just,
Yeah.
you know, I just
Ouch.
didn't think that was humanly possible. And then he was doing that. He was doing that stuff decades before that became a popular thing in more recent times. Doubles on a cross stick, nuts.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Oh,
crazy.
that hurts.
Is it? I always thought, and you probably know, Darren. I always thought he played, like it's a sort of inward double. So, but the fourth note. So it's right cross stick with the left, and then foot with the left. Is that would that be right? Like so, I can't. I don't want to try and sing it.
Go on.
But I thought. Yeah,
You can sing.
like so, the fourth 32nd note is
hi-hat?
the hi hat with a foot. Is that that's what I thought? You know,
I don't know. I always thought it was like kick, left, right, left.
Yeah, right. So maybe that makes sense because that's I mean, you know, but yeah, I wondered if it was the left foot was involved.
Yeah, I mean, it could be.
But isn't it cool the fact that it could be a halftime funk shuffle like Jeff Porcaro, but he plays eighth notes through the whole thing, and it's
same as
it swings just as hard as playing all the notes of a shuffle without him playing all the notes.
Yeah.
You know, like it's all an implied
exactly.
kind of shuffle the way that he's playing it, as opposed to say how Jeff Porcaro would play all the notes of a shuffle and it would still sound amazing, you know. But
right, and it all comes down to that right foot,
True.
eh? That right foot, just just laying off on that second double. Sorry, on the first double, giving it that little bit of a loop.
Yeah, right, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say it's the same in Roof Garden, the Al Jarreau, and I
was just how he managed to sort of play more like a team player, you know, and keeping, you know, he doesn't have to play the whole groove to make the whole thing work. Each person in the band has got their role, and he's just one part of it, as opposed to playing, say, like the Bernard Purdie shuffle, where you're playing every note within the subdivision to make the whole thing work, you know. That's what I really like about that track too, the feeling of it.
Or maybe it was a case of, all right, now we've just played Spain. It's a lot of bloody notes in that. Need a bit of a rest.
Yeah.
Post Rosanna, for me, anything that ever had the suggestion of being anything remotely like a halftime shuffle, I played it like with Jeff Porcaro, you know, middle triplet, Ghosted, until I heard Roof Garden, you know, because he's just playing the eighths, and when he grabs anything that is a 16th, it's swung, but the nuts and bolts or the bones of the groove are just it's a straight eighth funk beat. You know?
Amazing.
I remember once Gordon, the way you said it to me was when Steve Gadd turned 70, and you said something along the lines of, you know, he's outlived Buddy Rich, and I thought that it really surprised me when you said that, because Buddy Rich sort of seemed like a bit of an old man, you know, by the time he passed away, and yet there's still this youthful energy in Steve Gadd, and there's still this beautiful enthusiasm. Steve Gadd's 75 now, and you know, really amazing, and especially considering, you know, what he put his body through for all of those years. You know, the addictions and just the excessive amounts of work that guy did, and I guess the drug habit that came along with having to support that, man. And you know, here he is all these years later. We're still buying records with him on it, man. That's an amazing career.
Incredible vitality.
Yeah, you know,
I know.
I was just going to say, you know, like we're able in this day and age to still bear witness to one of the greatest music careers in history.
Yeah, it's still going. That's remarkable. Like, it's still going. Happening. It's still hitting as heavy as it ever did. Like, you know, like still coming out with beautiful gems. You know, it's like,
we've been sort of like we said earlier, like sharing stuff with each other through emails and different links and videos and stuff, and there's some Instagram stuff that he's still like who sent the video of the of Gadd playing on top of the
Oh yeah, I sent that.
On top of the from Facebook that was on top of the table, and then it looked like the husband came home or something.
Oh, that one, the pizza box,
pizza box, and he's just got to be moving, you know.
So swinging.
I love Rick Marotta, and I love the relationship he has with Rick, you know, and how like they just look like such great friends, and And Rick, you know, has always sort of got this like snide remarks about how much Steve worked and how much, you know, he got the calls, and you know, it's a beautiful thing. And he's, you know, there was a time he said to Steve, "Man, you know, why are you still working so much? You should slow down. You know, what are you doing?" And Gadd looked at him. He said, "Kids need new shoes."
Hilarious. Did you guys ever see those two Italian drum guys, and they invite Steve in, and
the pizza delivery guy.
The pizza delivery guy, and right at the end of that, he's singing Tarantella and playing 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Now that's really because while going boom. I said, "How did you do that?" And he goes, "I don't know." Because I mean that's actually pretty hard to sing a swung Tarantella, you know, song, and then try and play 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover with your hands and feet. It's like, you know.
Yeah, he's fulfilled the promise. You look on that the tribute to him, and there's all like John Beck from the Eastman School of Music and Louis Bellson and all those, you know, there's generations of heavy cats who saw him when he was young and knew that he was special, and he went on and you know, I think it's kind of ticked all the boxes and made them all proud. You know, it's a beautiful thing. But he's obviously just heavily gifted as well as his musicality. But I do love on that Italian thing where they ask him what's a groove. You know, do you remember that? And he says that, you know, a groove's an agreement. It's, it's beautiful.
I keep thinking about that. You know, that Zildjian honors Steve Gadd. I think that's something along the lines, and I think that's Bill Cosby's last public appearance.
Right.
I mean, like they obviously can't re-release that DVD now.
That's all right. They're going to get Rolf Harris to host it.
Speaking of which, you know, now this is another interesting thing, Stevie. You know, when at the height, I would say at the height of Steve Gadd's popularity, there were all these, you know, rumors about Steve Gadd, that, you know, Steve Gadd's fee was $4,000 a track, and he would get driven to sessions in limousines and all of that stuff, which I think in one of the Modern Drummer interviews he said, you know, I don't know where these rumors come from. You know, he just, but you know, there was a lot of sort of hype and all this sort of mystery about him, and people would like to sort of make up these stories about him, which I think is another example of, you know, when someone is that great at what they do, and certainly as prolific and ubiquitous, that people start making up these stories. You know, for whatever reasons, I'm not sure, but I just found it really interesting that that's kind of where things went, because he was just such a god of the music scene back in those days.
Yeah,
you're going to say?
Oh, I just wondered if you'd ever heard that story. I think it was that guy. Do you know Ben Sidran? You know that he. And there was an interview or some sort of an interview thing where they said Steve was late for a session. You know, like 30 minutes late for a session, but everyone said, yeah, but Steve is still an hour ahead of everyone else at the session. You know, you know, in terms of like musically being on top of it and then ready to go, you know. So
it's incredible stories, you know, about his, you know, him getting through sessions, and you know, either being incredibly tired or you know, affected by drugs or whatever. And, you know, I've heard stories where, you know, he's come to sessions, you know, late and, you know, just in all sorts of disarray. And yet, you know, the minute he's plonked behind a set of drums and you know, the red light goes on, he is on. And it makes me think about, how when we're hearing those classic recordings, how much of that stuff are we listening to where he's actually affected by all of that stuff? And, I personally think that there are some recordings of his where I think he's really on, like where he's really clean, and there's just there's another level of stuff going down. But man, if he can sound that amazing, with the stuff that was going through his bloodstream and the amount of, just probably on very little sleep, I mean, that is just incredible.
Yeah. He said to me that that whole period was just like really cloudy. He couldn't really think straight. He said he would never want to go back to that whole era, and that it was just kind of he says he can't remember a lot of the details of all of those great recordings and all that sort of stuff, but yeah, he just said it was really not actually a great buzz as what he thought it was at the time,
Yeah, and he like I said, he survived it, and and here he is all these years later, and he's still doing it. Still playing the instrument.
I think he looks more healthy now than what he did when he was in his 40s. I think he definitely looks healthier. Yeah.
I really like his sort of working class ethic about work. It's every sort of interview you hear now, he moved to Arizona, and they say, "Why'd you move there?" He said, "Well, there's some work here."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Man, with all his innovation and stardom and all that, he's still a working drummer. Like he still wants to get work. I love that. I love it. It's a real sort of old school work ethic.
The idea
that in that trap set interview.
Yes, the idea that someone would move to a desert for work as a drummer is amazing.
Let alone Steve Gadd.
Yeah.
Well, California's a desert, isn't it?
Yeah. I want to ask you guys what you think, and probably specifically the educators, Gordy, Darryn, Lance.
I don't consider myself an educator.
Me neither.
I don't consider myself educated.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that too. Yeah.
Through your guys' teachings and the young people coming up, how much of Gadd? I mean, we did talk a little bit about it. Gordy, you were talking about how he's on one. When you play them that track, that kind of thing. Lance, you were talking about how to play, like showing some kids playing in unison, that kind of thing. How much of Gadd are you showing your students, and how much do you think they're already aware of? Is it something that you're making sure that they are aware of?
Yeah. It's definitely in my curriculum, at the music school. Second year drummers we spend 2 semesters looking at comping of Steve Gadd and the soloing vocabulary amongst all the other greats, but definitely spend a big chunk of time looking at his playing. So it's pretty significant for me. Yeah.
How do you feel they take to it? Are they understanding it?
They all. I mean, I think they probably kind of listen to the sound of the drums and think, "Oh, wow, that's kind of 80s sounding drums." Although some aspects of his drum sound is kind of like back in fashion again, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I'm really happy about that. But yeah. I don't know, most of the students haven't really heard Steve Gadd before, and I have to really kind of, sell it to them, as I do with probably most of the drummers that we're looking at the music school. It's like a big selling point to them, to get them into it, you know. But at the end of it, there's usually a couple who've latched on to the essentials, you know, and see how it fits in. Yeah.
Goody.
Look, I suppose I'm not teaching as much these days.
Yeah.
And so when I do get guys, they're guys who want to work on specific areas who are probably, working guys who would be already aware of Steve Gadd. But he's certainly my go-to for, demonstrating any point pretty more, many points, I suppose. So, I mean, I use everybody. But I do have one sort of humorous anecdote from, and I might have told you this years ago, and this is, I can sneak a fourth tune in if you want to. I had a guy come to me. He was a maths teacher, a school maths teacher. I'm pretty sure he's not playing the drums anymore. This was like the 80s, probably still, maybe early 90s. And he, no, it would have been early 90s. He was sort of an older guy and had taken up drums late, but very kind of had a very cerebral approach, let's say. And he was asking me about 32nd note hi-hat, snare drum, hi-hat combinations, Gadd-esque things. And I said, and so I wrote out a couple of things and got him to play it and demonstrate it. And I said, there's a great example of it of Gadd playing it on a tune on an Eddie Gomez record called Mezga. You guys know that one? Yeah. It's just the duet with the with Eddie and Steve. And I said, so we went through the thing and I put the record on and we're sitting there listening to it. And I'm just getting taken away by the pocket. It's so funky and it's so sort of grounded and weighty and fat and it's beautiful. And I've forgotten about the 30-second notes. I'm listening to this and going, yeah, man, I'm just falling in love with Steve Gadd all over again. And it gets to the end of the tune and the guy looks at me and he goes, yeah, I don't know what all the fuss is about Steve Gadd. And I'm like, we just listened to the very same thing. Yeah. And it's just flooring me, and I guess if you're going to miss it, you're going to miss it. But maybe it's a stage. Like he probably heard it later and realised. But
probably gets it.
But that I any number of things I use him for. Lance, in looking at this, I found I had a guy just recently he's doing big band. Stuff. He plays. His wife's a singer, and he sits in with her big band and sings and plays the drums. And he wanted to get some more big band kind of thing going. And I've got a version of a big band tune arrangement called Basically Blues, which is a Buddy Rich band thing. And I've got a version of Buddy playing it, Warren Daly playing it, and Steve Gadd playing it. And it's fantastic to watch the three of them playing it together. And so, we went through this arrangement. And I noticed, Lance, that when Steve was there, he played that with the big band, with Roger Fox's band.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. His dynamic level approach to it. And
exactly, yeah.
And he wouldn't hit everything and he wouldn't set up everything, and he kind of had really figured out what he was going to land on and make a big deal out of, and there were moments where, he thought he was going to topple over with some of the drum fills, but it just created great tension, a little bit like Elvin Jones would create tension, but yeah.
On the making of Burning for Buddy, he plays it on that, and you see him on the video, and there's some figures and he pulls the band back. You think he's not going to make it, and he forces the band to just with his sheer weight, just sort of, it's like 1, 2, 3, and it's so dramatic and exciting, But and it's interesting because the one in New Zealand is quite different. He plays it quite differently, but it's still got that that shape. But I use him as a great example for all all that kind of stuff.
Just going back to the Burning for Buddy thing and that tension, and is he going to make it or is he not? That solo he did with Gadd and Corea.
Yeah,
And
Weckl. So Gadd's in the middle, Dave Weckle's off the one side and Vinny Collier, and then they're trading eights, right? And Vinny and Weckl are just like trying to go as fast as they can, and then Gadd's just doing his Gadd stuff, like, but there's one towards the end where he just starts going and you don't think he's going to make it, I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes, because me just standing here going you don't get it. You have to.
I didn't get it, Stevie, but I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You know what? We've been listening to these tracks, right? And like people, they're only going to hear the audio. I'm thinking like I might try and find some little bits of video clips in here, because the video session's been recorded on
I would have shaved.
Just us.
I've been hooking into the chocky biscuits too.
No, not all of it, but just parts where we're like listening to the songs, and then there's little bits that come up, and like we're all goofing off. Hey, I think you can't kind of get that by listening to it. You got to see it. But
if I could just say something too about that Buddy Rich Memorial Scholarship concert. So I went to the very first one that was held on Long Island back in 1989, and on the day that was happening, the film crew pulled out. So they restaged it in Los Angeles, I think in September of that year, and that's the one that ended up being released. But on the one that I went to, Dom Famularo was hosting it, and it was Gadd, Weckl, Vinny, Louis Belson, Greg Bissonette, Joe Morello, and a few other dudes as well, sort of lesser known people. And maybe a couple of years after that, I met Dom Famularo for the first time and told him, that I was at that concert. And anyway, he told me a great story. The concert hasn't started. Everyone's in the green room, leading up to the concert about to start. And he said that, Weckl's on a pad warming up, just going nuts on a pad. Vinny's in another corner of the room with a pad going nuts. Bissonette's doing the same thing. And Gadd is walking he's got his sticks in his hand, his drum charts under his arm, and he's just pacing up and down, just trying to get that tempo right.
I heard that story. Yeah. Says it. Says it all.
Right?
He did have his metronome with him that whole tour in New Zealand. And before every song, it was metronome. Right, got it. And that was it. He was very pedantic about the tempo.
Yeah, that's just another reason why I just have so much incredible respect for him. If I may say something about the educational side of it from my perspective. And one of the things that I think we're up against, drummers of our generation teaching people who are, a generation or two below us, is that it's really hard to make them get what it is about Steve Gadd that is so appealing to people of our generation. And because, there's let's say the current trend of drumming is, it's chops, it's fast, it's loud, it's monodynamic. And when Gordon was talking before about, his chosen track where, Gordon said, just the way this whole thing unfolds and unravels, that isn't something that's really hard to make young dudes understand, because I think a lot of young drummers, their perception is really it's so visual. Watching people play is such a thing, and an example of that was I was talking with a young student once, and I said, "Oh, you should check out some Vinny Colaiuta," and he says, "Oh, I have been. I've been checking him out." And I said, "Oh, great. What albums do you have?" And he said, "Oh, it's just on YouTube," and it's really hard. Maybe a few young students will get it, but I don't think a lot of young students will get why that impacted us so greatly, why his playing impacted us so greatly, because we're at a stage now where, shorten attention spans and, you know, all that sort of stuff. It's hard to get through. But so what I always use Steve as an example of, you know, great time playing, what not to play, and then, you know, just digging into his vocabulary and saying, oh, you know, this really great lick of Steve Gadd's is really simple. You know, when you break it down, it is this. And as a way of demonstrating, you know, that vocabulary, even complex sounding vocabulary, does have its roots in, you know, pretty much basic stuff like paradiddles, for example.
Mm.
You just mentioned Vinnie Colaiuta there. I'm going to bring up a track that he played with Gadd, and it's the $6 Million Man soundtrack.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have heard this.
I think I've heard.
Somebody talk.
While you're doing that, I'll just, you know, because you said Vinnie Colaiuta, there are some recordings of drummers like Vinnie Colaiuta and even early Dave Weckl, so early Vinnie and early Dave, where they do sound a lot like Steve Gadd. So there's a couple of tracks with Vinnie that I'll mention. One of them is called Stride. It's a Tom Scott from a Tom Scott album, and the album's called Desire. And that track, you know, Vinnie, you could really hear Steve Gadd's influence in Vinnie Colaiuta's playing. And there's another track. I don't know if you remember, there was an album that came out in the 80s called Session 3. And it was an album that was released by Yamaha. It was a digital recording, so an early digital recording. And it was...
So it got black and white
cover. It's two keyboard players, and it was to promote a keyboard, the first digital keyboard that Yamaha released, which was the predecessor of the DX7. So this album's got Vinnie Colaiuta and Nathan East is playing bass. And the last track on the album, Vinnie plays some... like he's trading fours or something, and the phrasing is so much like Steve Gadd. It's really great to hear that direct line of influence from Steve Gadd. And then the, you know, the early Weckl things like that Michelle Camillo album called Why Not, the solo on the title track, man, that's, you can again really hear the strong Steve Gadd influence in the vocabulary and certainly in the drum sound as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Weckl saying at a drum clinic once he had to consciously stop himself at anything in a certain tempo range from doing the ride cymbal 16th and you know he said because every song ended up there. You know,
well, he said, you know, at a clinic here in town, he said that, you know, firstly he had to stop himself from going to see him play. And he was saying at one point, or someone, maybe Jay Oliver said at some point, he was so obsessed with Steve Gadd that he grew a beard. And there was a photo on one of his old websites, a young Weckl with a beard.
Yeah.
I found
Thank
the
God.
track. Yeah, $6 Million Man theme.
Hey man, we're filling it.
Yeah,
And
Stretch.
I was going to tap dance.
It's off an album, Randy Waldman,
Yeah.
Superheroes.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Can you hear them both in there?
Oh my God.
It's pretty special, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Hamish, I'm going to play one of your songs, Jealous Kind, Joe Cocker.
Yeah,
I found this really interesting, this selection. So
Yeah, I have the same thing as well as all of us, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's like, what
what do you choose?
do
Yeah.
you choose? And then I thought, it's just such a great rhythm section take.
Yep.
And everybody, it just feels so great. And there's not a lot going on, but except the combined, the agreement of the group, and clearly it's stuff, it's the Joe used stuff on a couple of tours and a couple of records. And again, like I've always been, I love Joe, Al Jarreau, Michael McDonald. I love singers, so this for me was when I was going through all sorts of different Gadd stuff and all the bigger production stuff and everything. I thought, this is just like these guys are just playing this tune like no one's ever going to hear it.
Yeah.
And it's just so beautiful and so natural.
So this is the Stuff Band.
Yeah, and I think from what I've read and what I've heard Steve say, like these guys helped form him, at that time, and certainly in the groove sort of perspective. And Richard T was a dear friend of his, I think, and the other tune that I picked with Teabag is obviously a tribute to him. I'm assuming, but yeah, so that's what I'm getting at with this.
What year was this, Steve?
I think it's. She wrote it down. 76.
Don't be angry if I seem rude each time we meet. Someone that you once knew, that you say used to be so close to you. It's just that I'm so afraid someone might steal you away. I lose my mind.
They got all the time in the world, eh?
Oh man, yeah, it's like.
And I can't help myself the way I feel sometimes. Guess I'm the jealous kind.
Great tune too.
It was alright when I first met you. I did mine, but now things have changed. I'm just not the same, and now I'm fine. I want you all to myself. Nobody said you will, nobody else. You must forgive me for the way I act sometimes. Guess I'm the jealous kind.
And it goes on like that.
Yeah, no, that's what's cool about it,
Yeah,
It's a sweet.
I was just going to say, the way you guys described that just before, they got all the time in the world, nothing to prove, man. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like a bunch of guys hanging out playing, and that sort of relates to what you were saying, Darryn, too, about the younger players having it all on YouTube and all that, which we're all enjoying, of course, as well. But in the beginning, it was just vinyl. We kind of got our information from some liner note writing guy about the music that musicians played.
Probably a year after it happened too.
Yeah, by some sort of intellectual talking about Coltrane or whatever, whoever it was, and we like you talk about the sort of flutter hi-hat things with Gadd. I mean, I'd be listening to those things, lifting the needle off the record, and going back and back and back, and then trying to sort of somehow, imitate it, like you said, Stevie. You know, like you just kind of go, "Oh, this is my version of it."
Exactly.
You know? and I think it's sort of very much music driven.
Yeah, let's not forget though that he was big on education early on, and his DCI videos were the first drum instructional videos.
No, Elvin's wasn't an instructional video, but it was the first drum video. I think.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right.
A different drum. I think it's
That's
called.
right. Yeah. Well, but Steve was. That was I so they've said in modern drum, and that was important to him to sort of pass the stuff on, and I guess I'm of the generation that was, videos were coming out in the 80s, towards mid 80s, I guess, and so I got to see how he played those things,
Yeah.
But yeah, there's certainly, and I know, you talk to the older cats around, and they go, "Oh, you guys were lucky. We only had records, or we only had 78s."
I mean, obviously I had the videos too, eventually, but yeah.
I remember sitting watching videos with you too, and it's interesting too when
drum videos.
Yeah, that's exactly. We did that as well.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
Here we go. Here they go.
It's descending. It's descending.
Yeah, it started already.
It's interesting watching and listening to music. How your listening changes depending who you're listening with.
Absolutely.
Because I remember. Oh no, I won't go into it. But you pointed out some things. You pointed out some things, and I thought, it's an angle I hadn't thought. I'll tell you about it later. You might want to. You can edit all that, can't you?
Yeah,
it's staying there.
Oh boy.
I just want to say, Gadd is a prolific brush player. That's something that we haven't talked too much about. Like, his like. There's a lot of recordings, whether it's contemporary or jazz. I guess he would be one of the first drummers to really make brushes funky sounding. That I can think of, and a lot of people copied that aspect. I mean, even the way that he plays, Mozambique between the snare and the hi hat with brushes, like that Bullet Train track. Or even Summertime by Al Jarreau, with the brushes on that. And that Joe Sample album that you were talking about as well, I think has got brushes on there.
I saw Steve play, I think it was at the Apollo in London when I was living there. He was playing with Randy Crawford, but it was with the Joe Sample, Joe Sample trio. So it was Joe Sample, Joe Sample's son was playing bass, and Steve, and that the trio came out on the stage first, and they did 3 instrumental tunes, and then Randy did the rest of the show because it was her gig, and this is going to blow your mind. He played. Not only did he play that whole gig with brushes, but he did it with the wires turned off on the snare drum.
Oh.
And it's that thing of that, that restraint, that he's not itching to pick up the sticks and go ballistic, and he doesn't feel the need to turn on the wires on the snare drum to offer any kind of change in sonic quality. He's just there playing a groove. And I was teaching at a drum school there, and a bunch of my students were there, and they got it. I was really pleased and very impressed. They got it. They got that he was just happy to not to play all of the licks and vocabulary that we know. And another opportunity that I got to see him play there was with was at Ronnie Scott's, and it was that group that he had with Paul Bollenbeck, Ronnie Cuba, and Joey DeFrancesco playing Hammond. And he would there was one tune that he played a solo, and it was basically 2 brushes in each hand, and the bolt, and the whole thing was on the 2 floor toms.
Yeah, good.
And the fact that he's prepared to do that he's prepared to, because obviously when we play brushes there is a whole bunch of our vocabulary that we probably can't do because it's just a different way of going about things. And the fact that he's happy to settle for that and enjoy the sound that the brushes create without having to fall back on all of his vocabulary, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I remember Jim Kelly once telling me he was in LA and they went to a club and saw him play. It might have been the Baked Potato, I'm not sure, but it's a smallish club. This is probably 80s, early 80s. And he said he was the only guy not playing like Steve Gadd. not playing Steve Gadd. Didn't. Yeah. Oh, it's just an observation. I got to hear him do a drum clinic in Boston once, and there was a bunch of things that struck me, and it was beautiful. And I ended up sitting next to Dave Maddox from the Fairport Convention. He was because he lives in Boston now. But one thing that struck me, Gadd came out and he's just beautiful. He's got this, beautiful humility and he said this thing. Someone said, "Do you get nervous?" And he said, "Yeah, man, I get nervous." He said, "But I just try to." He said, "If I start thinking about things like I can't play as fast as that guy, or I can't play the things I used to be able to play, or whatever," he said, I just concentrate on the music, and he said, I just try to remember that I love you and you love me, and it's all cool." But there wasn't a shred of ego about it. It was actually just how it was
real.
The real thing. Yeah, it wasn't wasn't weird. It was just beautiful. But what was interesting when he played and he started playing and he was doing his thing and it was beautiful, and then he sort of stopped and he said clap. And he clapped, and he started playing the same kind of vocabulary, but I thought, he loves playing with people. Like he loves having support and playing. Like the stuff it was different when he started playing with the people, and I thought, yeah, man, that's it, isn't it? It's like it's all about what we can do together. That's what struck me.
Yeah, he did a clinic in Melbourne about 3 or 4 years ago. And he's actually a very funny man. Like, I didn't realise he had such a sense of humour, but he said a great thing about, getting in, like avoiding going down that sort of dark path of getting inside your head and questioning everything. And just the way he said, it's like going into a bad neighbourhood. You don't want to go there alone. and it's true.
Yeah.
Hamish, you got anything?
Just actually, that time when I met him at the intermission of the James Taylor concert, a friend of mine, Dave Hibbard, the drummer, Dave. Yeah. He had actually, he's got a bit of front, and he actually rang Steve, found out where they were staying, rang Steve, and said, or left a message. I don't know if it was in person, but. I said, I'm, a Sydney drummer and I really love James Taylor and I really love your playing and blah, 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 but I actually can't afford a ticket. So Steve organised 2 tickets for Dave for the State Theatre. And when I met him that night, when I was super fan, he said, Larry Golding introduced me as a drummer and all that stuff, and he said, "Oh, do you know a guy called Dave Hibbard?" And I was like, "Wow, you're kidding!" And so,
and you didn't know at the time that he called.
No, how's that? No, that's pretty out.
Yeah,
And when I told Dave, I said he actually said your name.
Hey, Haim, do you remember what your comment was to Bill Risby at interval of that gig? Because Bill's told me he ran into they're at the James Taylor, and there was he takes an interval, and you ran into Bill in the interval, and you said to Bill, "That's what you get if you use your technique for good and not evil."
That's true. So true. That's so true.
Yeah, it's so true. No Rambo drumming.
Yeah. It's like Gadd said too. Like Fills are for thrills, but groove pays the bills.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, man. Do you say that?
I think he did.
That's worth bottling right there.
Yeah.
Well, there's that. I think it's the 10th anniversary of Modern Drummer, where they kind of did interviews with lots of the Buddy and Steve, and I remember in there, the guy says he asked him a question and about, you know, what is it like? What's the technique? What's the sort of thing? You know, and he said, and he sort of, you know, he said he thought about it for a while, and he said, "Look, I think a good groove cuts through a whole lot of bullshit. You know, if you can make people feel comfortable."
Yeah.
I once Enzo Fiella was used to be the Yamaha rep. You know,
yeah. Well, he's the guy that organised that coffee at Starbucks.
Right. Well, Gadd was coming out. Might have been with Paul Simon, or you know, it was an earlier time. And he rang me and said, "Oh, I've arranged for you to interview Steve." I was like, "Oh, cool, great." so I went back through, you know, in preparation for the interview, which the spoiler is it never actually happened. So unfortunately, I never got to do it. But in preparation for the interview, I went back through all my old Modern Drummer magazines and scoured every interview, and, you know, Percussion International and Downbeats and all sorts of stuff, looking for the question that you know, I was smarter than the interviewers, and I was going to ask, where Steve would, you know, unwittingly spill forth the secret of drumming without, you know, because I was so incisive, and, you know, and I realised reading all these interviews that he says it every time, and you know, basically he says, you know, I try to find something that fits and make it feel really good. You know, that's pretty much what he does.
Yeah.
And to, you know, despite all the obvious innovation and the, you know, with all the things we've talked about, the techniques and the various stickings and the beats and the 50 ways and the despite all of that, I think none of that would have meant anything had it not felt so great.
Absolutely.
You know? It's just the way he finds the middle of it.
Yeah.
And because you can hear that Joe Cocker thing where he's not playing anything that most people can't play, but it's how he's playing it.
Yeah.
You know? It's just
how he's playing with the group, like how everybody's playing together is amazing. And I think that's the thing about like great drummers, or most of them, you know, is that the music actually comes first somehow, you know, like even the great technicians, you know, when they're playing behind a soloist or something, it's incredible. And it's for me, it's the physical feeling that attracts me every time. And Gadd it was something really easy about him, you know, like it's so palpable. It like captures you so totally that, you know, you can't turn away. And I haven't turned away my whole life since hearing him, you know, since we all. And here we are now.
Well, you know, that's so true, Hamish, because like I said at the start of this whole thing, you know, I remember when I heard him for the first time on that George Benson record, my ears pricked up. It was just like, hang on, this is not a sound I'm used to hearing. And like we're talking about him now.
Yeah.
Lance, any final thoughts?
Not really. I think like you were talking about simple, sort of simple-ish, minimalist kind of drumming, you know, parts that Steve has come up with. You know, I remember one track that just blew me away. That was a David Sanborn, Bob James album. I don't know if you remember that one, but
Double Vision.
Double Vision. Yeah, and there's a couple of, there's one track where I think it's Paulinho da Costa's playing percussion on it. But Steve just lets Paulinho fill up a lot of the subdivision, and Steve is just like boom, ba, da, boom, ba, you know, just like hitting a backbeat and it sounds, you know, it's not playing it half-heartedly. It just totally fits with what's going on there, you know, and I'm amazed at that. And, you know, I've done gigs where I've played percussion and played with other drummers, but they don't hear things the way that that Steve would hear a whole group and how his drum part fits in with the music, you know. So I think that, you know, that's one of the cool things, and I think probably we've sort of said it in a way, but he's got to be kind of like the blueprint for the working drummer, you know, to be able to play in all those different genres, you know. I mean, that's sure, you know, we look at great drummers like Tony Williams or Elvin Jones or all these great jazz drummers, but none of them were as versatile as Steve Gadd, you know, where he could cover all those bases so well, you know. I think that's another amazing thing, and where each of our examples have kind of covered all those different areas.
That's great, Lance, what you're saying, and because it's exactly right, you know, and what I get from that is that, you know, he's just so prepared to put his ego aside. Yeah. You know, it just, you know, if there was one last thing I was going to say to personify him and his musicality, is that, you know, it's what I think Bill Evans was quoted as saying, you know, you've got to put the music first. And he's always done that. He's, you know, there's no ego in what he does. He just puts the music first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's that.
And he's still working.
Yeah, it's still working.
Yeah. There's that quote on one of the, not the Zildjian Day in New York, but one of the previous Zildjian Days, that there's those sort of videos floating around, and he's playing with Ralph McDonald, but he says, you know, for me, it's the music that inspires me to play the drums, not the other way around. It's, you know, it's pretty succinct.
Right.
That's awesome. That's a good way to end it.
It is tops. Lance Phillip, Hamish Stuart, Gordon Rytmeister, Darryn Farrugia, thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Stevie.
Hang with you guys again. It's a bloody joy, man. Like, personally, I mean, you guys are inspirational to me, not just as a drummer, but as people. I mean, Lance, you and I have known each other for many years. But, you know, Darryn, Hamish, Gordo, just in these last little while, we've got to know each other quite well, and we've become friends, and it's just awesome to be able to sit and share all this stuff with you guys, and, you know, it's like a lesson every time I hang out.
Well, I really appreciate being here, because it's something very dear to me, and, like, you know, Steve's thing, and you know, you sent me that interview with Rick Marotta, and I feel nostalgic for something I wasn't even a part of, but I feel like I was. I feel like I kind of was there for so much of it, and it's so deeply it's so deeply ingrained. I really, he's the guy I think that's moved me the most. You know.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Certainly.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Same.
Yeah.